This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is finally time for the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs. We've got 4 games on tap across Tuesday and Wednesday, and our job today is to break down all 4 of those games and lay out the best bets over at FanDuel Sportsbook by talking to Austin Swaim of FanDuel Research and picking his brain on his best bets for this week's games. Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research. Joined here as mentioned by Austin Swaim. You can find him on both X and Blue Sky, a Swaim3. Check out his work over at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior editor for us. Austin, happy New Year to you. How you doing today?
I am doing outstanding, Jim. You know, college football is probably number 2 for me on the pecking order. We all have our Mount Rushmore of sports, and like around New Year's, to me, I always synonymize, easy for me to say, college football, New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, all this stuff. I'm such a nerd when it comes to all the other bowl games, and then the CFP games this year are unbelievable in the second round. It should be a better round for us than a few of the projected blowouts we had in the first round.
And still a couple potential blowouts here in the second round as well, but still intriguing games regardless. Like, sure, Penn State's a big favorite over Boise State, but we get to watch Ashton Genty. We get to watch some Cam Scadaboo for like Arizona State too. So even in the games that are less competitive, there's still at least something to wet our whistles with at least.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. And like, I've been on this train in both pro and college football. I think neutral game environments make for better competitive games just because you take these 19, 20-year-old kids on the road, there's 120,000 screaming people. I know I wouldn't perform well in that situation, and I'm a 29-year-old man. So like, I understand that versus I think a neutral can lead to a better day. Obviously, the Rose Bowl is always gorgeous on HGTV. So I love this type of setup, and I think it could even help a little bit of those underdogs stay closer than if they had to go on the road to Beaver Stadium or Austin or wherever.
It also does help that 2 of those games, just like from a game perspective, gonna be a lot of fun. Today, we're going to dive in and break down all 4 games with Austin, getting his read on where he's seeing value in the markets over at FanDuel Sportsbook. We'll talk some futures as well beforehand to get you set for Tuesdays and Wednesdays action. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Same schedule this week as last week. We're going to record on Monday, Thursday, and Friday here on Covering the Spread. Thursday, Best Bets with Megan Payton. And then on Friday, Player Props. We'll be breaking down Best Player Props for NFL Week 18 as well, all right here in this exact same feed. So search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. And of course, all these shows do stream live on our brand new YouTube page as well. If you're watching YouTube, hey, we appreciate you. B, leave us a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications to get notified as we go live Monday, Thursday, Friday this week, 4 p.m. Friday, 10 a.m. on Friday. And of course, the DFS show will be at noon on Friday as well. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways to help you pick up a W. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. This way, you'll be all set for the biggest games of the year. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Austin, we'll dig into the games here in just 1 second. First, we want to start things off by talking futures because our final real inflection point is coming up this weekend. Any futures you want to snag before we get to kickoff on Tuesday night of the first game?
Yeah, I kind of have a lean in this market. I have not betted or tracked it or anything like that to this point, but my general sentiment now as we sit here today is I think Ohio State at plus 330 is the best bet on the board, because my main question going into the CFP was, could Ohio State win a game against a team like Tennessee that is a top 5 rush D, put it on Will Howard's shoulders after what happened against Michigan? That was an emphatic yes. He had a 98.8 quarterback rating, only 5 incompletions. It wasn't exactly ideal weather either. And like that matched 326 yards and 80% completion against Oregon earlier this year. You kind of look around and you start to feel the best out of Will Howard among the top contenders quarterbacks throwing the ball. We'll see what we see about Dylan Gabriel this week, one of the Heisman top 5 finalists. And look, at the end of the day, Ohio State third in rushing yards per attempt allowed, second in passing yards per attempt allowed, first in EPA per play on defense allowed. So their defense looks amazing. It kind of feels like a collision course between Texas and Ohio State on those respective sides of the bracket. And, or I should say, not Ohio State, the winner of the Rose Bowl, which is a very tight competitive game. Oregon could certainly win it. It's kind of hard not to like Ohio State, though, in that game and in this market when they continue to put out these efforts against top 10 teams.
I do find it very interesting that Ohio State's plus 330 and Oregon is plus 480, despite the fact that game is, I think, a 2.5 point spread right now. So tight spread, but a discount on Oregon there. But Austin is liking Ohio State, maybe tying into that game, as we'll discuss that later on as well. Let's start things off, though, by talking about the first game of the quarterfinal round. That is Penn State at Boise State. Right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, Penn State favored by 11.5, and the total in this game checking in at 53.5 point. Penn State's played awesome in the opening round of the playoff, and now facing a Boise State team that didn't have the best advanced numbers entering the playoff, but do have some rest here. So is that enough for you to consider laying the 11.5, or is that too big of a number for you?
I love the way you phrased that intro, because, like, yeah, it's almost like my brain and my heart are battling here, because it's terrifying to bet against Boise State in a Fiesta Bowl after what happened all those years against Oklahoma. There has to be positive juju there, right?
Sure.
But when you look at the math behind this matchup, the selling point for the Broncos as an 11.5 point underdog is that they will have an elite running game against the 9th best rush defense in a yards per attempt basis. They're 6th in EPA basis. I just can't get there, man. And I love Ashton Genty. I know he's incredible and talented, but we saw him bottled under 130 yards in the first matchup by UNLV. And Penn State is a huge step up in competition. That's what makes both Boise State, and we'll talk about Arizona State in the next game, so hard to handicap, is that, like, they are going way off the deep end into a totally different tier of college football. And you look at our friend Brendan Gudula, he did a write-up of all the prospects in the CFP before it started. It was literally just Ashton Genty for Boise State. Nobody on either line, no skill players.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. And I know they had a 3-point loss to Oregon. They hung in close against Oregon, but that was a very different Oregon team that had just barely gotten by Idaho by 10 points. So Oregon kind of figured it out with all these transfers as the season progressed. They've started to play up to their talent level. I don't know if Boise State can hang here. And a particular matchup that I'm looking at, and one of the reasons why in our expert picks over on FanDuel Research, I gave out Drew Aller's passing yardage, which didn't end up working out for me because he only threw it 22 times because of the pick sixes against SMU. But I loved this matchup. Boise State 86th in passing yards per attempt allowed. I think we see the best of Drew Aller in this one, where they didn't really need him in the first round. And in particular, Drew Aller's passing prop, just 225.5, over 1.5 touchdowns is a decent price at minus 132. Those are the props I was looking at this game when I feel like Boise State in general is sort of a pass funnel. I could see Aller, an NFL draft quarterback, absolutely carving them up in this one. So I like Penn State. Given that they may have to pass, I like laying the points here. A little scary because of the Boise State juju, but I think Penn State's a way better team.
All right. As you're talking about the Aller props, the passing yardage prop right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, 225.5 over for him is minus 114. You mentioned the 2 pick sixes. It's just, those are killers for volume because they give the ball back to the opposing team, take away a possession, and they give you a big lead, which means you don't have to throw the ball at all. And like they could do that again against Boise State, but pick sixes are a bit more rare than that. So I think that you're not going to expect the same kind of, I mean, I'll say calamity for that kind of bet. That is a calamity for that kind of thing. 225.5, not a bad number. And 11.5 is like it's a big number, but also again, these games matter so much. I don't worry as much about passing volume decreasing in a positive script, just because like you can never really truly take your foot off the gas in these scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. And another note on the pick six is Boise State extreme rush rate. Obviously, they hand it to Ashton Genty whenever they can. That helps avoid some of that variance, as well as sacks, fumbles, that type of thing. If Boise State can't get their running game going early in this game, it could get very, very ugly quickly.
All right, so Austin is on the Drew Aller props as mentioned, and also okay Lane the 11.5 with Penn State in this game. Let's move now to New Year's Day and talk about the first game, which is Texas taking on Arizona State right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Texas here by 12.5, and the total in this game sitting at 51.5. And Arizona State did close the year out on a massively high note. They won a bunch of games, earned this playoff berth, got solid quarterback play, awesome running back as well, but now facing pretty stellar Texas team. So, Austin, can Arizona State keep up and keep this game close enough to cover, or are you riding with Texas here?
Yeah, I know Oregon, Ohio State's going to be awesome. I know Notre Dame, Georgia's going to be awesome. To me, this is the most interesting matchup of how Arizona State hangs, because when Cam Scadaboo and Sam Levitt have both been healthy, they have a 10-1 record. They've scored 34.6 points per game. I genuinely don't know what to expect from them against a Texas defense that just got wrecked. 6.4 yards per play by Clemson. There was nearly a comeback, pretty heroic style in that one. But the defensive side of the ball is where we've seen some of these Big 12 schools overmatched in bowl games, and that's not good news. Where we saw Miami scored 41 points on Iowa State's superior defense in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and Arizona State isn't a great looking defense on paper. 90th in yards per play allowed, 5.8. They are an improved 26th in ESPN's SP Plus rankings, but that is still well behind these other true contenders. So I like Texas's team total here, not knowing how Arizona State's going to hang on, but the team total for Texas is 31.5 points. Seems totally attainable. They just scored 34 on a Clemson defense that I have a higher grade on, and they've topped 34 points 8 different times this year. It just hasn't been overly recently, whereas Arizona State, below average defense on their schedule. I do think the Horns can name their number, but Kenny Dillingham drew up a couple trick plays in the Big 12 championship game. I could see Arizona State hanging around on that end, but I do think Texas's elite offense, they got the running game going against Clemson. They are tough to stop when it gets downhill. So I like the Longhorns to score. Really, you could even go to an alternate total, 34-35 over key numbers here, but 31.5 is the official team total listing.
The 31.5 over is minus 112. The alt markets you were alluding to, if you want to go over 33.5 is currently even money. If you want to go over, let's say 37.5 plus 176 at FanDuel Sportsbook, right. And then things do scale up from there as well. So checking out the alt markets on Texas, you mentioned how they hadn't gone over 31.5 in a bit, but like you said, it's so dependent on schedule. Like they faced Georgia a couple of times in there. They faced Clemson, whose defense has been very, very good as well. And facing Arizona State is a very different task. So especially with college football, where the schedule varies so much, you want to, as you are doing here, keep in mind the way the schedule breaks down when you're looking at trends and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a perspective of, I do have a prop here that I like a little bit as well. Cam Scadaboo, love the guy. His rushing prop is actually 99.5. So whether you think he's going to top century mark or not, I'm looking at his receiving prop, actually, 27.5. I think Texas top 10 rush defense, EPA and yards per attempt basis. I do think they're going to have to get creative. And by the way, that went up. I was just researching for my prop article. 27.5. It's already 29.5. Scadaboo, actually the second highest surviving target share of the Sun Devils that'll be in action on Wednesday. So he gets a lot of volume as is. If they can't get the running game going, Texas has a great pressure rate. I think Scadaboo could be very, very busy in the receiving area on Saturday. So I prefer him to his rushing prop in this one. And I'm looking to find out how ASU hangs around. I'm a Big 12 guy with my Buffs and enjoyed the conference this year, and I'd love to see him put a good showing together.
Yeah, Scadaboo's number right now, 29.5 receiving yards. Over for him is minus 114. All right, let's dig into these two very fun games on Wednesday night, beginning with the Rose Bowl. Ohio State taking on Oregon right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Ohio State favored by 2.5, as we mentioned, the Oregon money line plus 112, and the total in this game sitting at 55.5 points. Obviously, the first version of this matchup was a thriller, Austin. So I'm not going to, we're not going to do a big lead in here. I'm just going to ask you, who you got? Ohio State against Oregon.
And I'm going to have a lame answer for you in that I don't really know. My favorite bet in this game is that I like the total. I think a total in this game this high is very dicey with a defense like Ohio State, which sounds hilarious because there were 63 points when these guys met in their first matchup in Oregon. But I mentioned Ohio State in the open, talking about top 3 defense yards per attempt basis, SP Plus's best overall defense. They have allowed over 17 points just once. It was to Oregon, so you say maybe that is a level of competition thing, but Ohio State's now also gone through Tennessee and Penn State as well. I have to downgrade that. I also have to downgrade this Oregon offense in a neutral site environment versus when they were at home. But Oregon is not a bad defense themselves. They're 22nd in opponent yards per play, top 10 in most of those efficiency metrics. And both of these teams, some of this is based on schedule. They've been blowing guys out, but they are outside the top 70 in seconds per play. And my general thesis for this game for both teams is they have such dynamic offenses. I wonder if we'll see more of an emphasis on ball control here. That we may reach this kickoff with a game in the CFP not decided by single digits yet. This one may very well be the first one. I think my favorite reason to take it is because we had the uncharacteristically high amount of points in the first game. I do feel like I get some value on expecting that to flip. And there were just a lot of weird chunk plays in that first matchup. 11 different guys had at least a 20-yard catch or run. So it was just a lot of chunk plays versus high tempo, back and forth shootout. I expect these teams to do a much better job keeping the lid on it, and I like the under here in the Rose Bowl.
Can I clarify? You said 11 guys had a rush or a catch of 20 plus yards. That's absurd.
Yeah, 11 different guys. Some of those guys double dipped as well. It was just a crazy game that went back and forth right to the buzzer. But in general, both of these defenses very good at limiting chunk plays. So I'm fascinated to see how the rematch looks stylistically.
Okay, selfishly, I want that again. I want them to be short of the end zone and then have a turnover so we can get your under here. But like selfishly, give me the chunk plays again, but in a way that can still allow you to catch, because like I was wondering, like that game ruled, and it's like, okay, duplicate that, but keep it lower scoring. So a lot of long plays that don't lead to touchdowns, we can cook then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of fading an interesting trend in the Rose Bowl. 9 of the last 11 Rose Bowls have gone over. It is a great game environment in that there's usually no weather impact whatsoever. But these two particular defenses in a CFP setting, I'm kind of leaning against that trend. I'm not really like a trend better in spots and things like that, but I thought it'd be an interesting note given that you want to see some scoring.
All right, so we're looking at the under 55.5 minus 115 for Ohio State against Oregon. Hopefully it's still fun despite going under in this one. Let's finish up here by talking about Notre Dame against Georgia right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Georgia a slim 1.5 favorite. Their money line minus 118. Notre Dame is at minus 102. Total in this one is at 45.5. And obviously a lot of unknowns here at Georgia playing without Carson Beck, but they're still a slim favorite. So Austin, how do you see this one playing out?
This particular spread is interesting in that Notre Dame opened a slight favorite after they beat Indiana, then it popped over to Georgia, and now it's inching back toward Notre Dame. We could have a true pick 'em by kickoff here, which is fascinating. I kind of understand why it shifted that way around here. Georgia and Notre Dame have met 3 times. Georgia won all 3 matchups. This since 1980, by the way. Interestingly enough, all of them one-score games. So the history of this series is very close. They even have a couple of recent games as well. But I just have a hard time backing Gunnar Stockton, first career start against arguably the best pass defense in college football in Notre Dame. Notre Dame absolutely shut down Curtis Rourke for Indiana in their first game. He was 3rd in quarterback rating this year, whereas Georgia has not been hallmarked by elite quarterback play with Carson Beck, and now Stockton comes in. He has had ample time to prepare for this game, but it's as hard as it gets. And I just don't feel like Georgia's defense is also the same outlier it was during their dynasty. They're only 10th in yards per play allowed. They're 29th in rushing yards per attempt allowed, 41st in passing yards per attempt allowed. We saw Ole Miss have a ton of success running the ball against Georgia, and that is Notre Dame's MO. One of the props that I couldn't believe that I got here was Riley Leonard's rushing props. It's 34.5 yards. It's also an anytime touchdown for Riley Leonard, who is now ND's touchdown leader, is plus 120. I think in a close competitive game like this, we're going to see more rushing volume out of Leonard than we've seen in a lot of Notre Dame's blowouts, where at this point, I think Leonard's legs, that's why I feel better about Notre Dame in general this year. I think they have a chance to win the national championship, and I like their money line here at minus 102, and I feel like those bets correlate well because Leonard's ability to make things happen with his legs is how Notre Dame can move the chains. I don't think they're going to ask him to drop back and throw the ball a ton. They're going to lean on their offensive line. This seems to be a close, low-scoring game, but I feel better about Notre Dame's quarterback situation, so I'm taking the Irish.
Looking back to that Texas game, when Stockton came in, it kind of seemed like there was an initial like, "Uh-oh, what are we seeing here?" And he was able to have some success. But then once the Texas defense is able to like kind of get used to what they were seeing, they settled in and were able to limit him quite a bit. So I'm curious how things work out there, because obviously Notre Dame has a full time to prep for him, but also Georgia has had a couple weeks to prepare for him as the starter here. So it's a very interesting dynamic with the way that works out. What are you kind of expecting out of him specifically as he steps up here with Beck out?
So I feel that Stockton is having to go up against a much tougher test in Notre Dame, really in all levels. Notre Dame top 10 in pressure rate. They're one of the heaviest turnover teams as far as forcing interceptions from the secondary. Xavier Watts going to be an NFL guy. They lost Benjamin Morrison, unfortunately, for a long time ago at this point. But I think Stockton could have a difficult time. Now, he doesn't bring the sort of he can bring a little bit more mobility than Carson Beck, which is kind of an interesting trait. I will be interested to see how much they use his legs, given, I think you're right. I think there was a bit of a shell shock there about what happened with his mobility. But when Stockton comes in, I expect Notre Dame's going to focus on containment. They're going to focus on keeping him to throw outside the numbers. And they're one of the best teams in the country to do that. Marcus Freeman has produced an incredibly stable product in these big games. They went on the road to Kyle Field. They absolutely demolished Indiana, way more than that score said. I have a hard time for a guy making his first start. I think he's going to struggle in this one. So it could be incredibly low scoring, but the difference in mobility when it's a close, low scoring game like that, Georgia really hasn't seen a test like this against a really great quarterback, other than maybe a Jackson Dart, which they flunked out of. They almost lost the SEC because of that. So Leonard's legs to me is a big factor in this game.
Okay, so the props that Austin is looking at here, Riley Leonard plus 120, anytime touchdown. Is looking at the rushing prop as well for Leonard. That is over 34.5 is minus 114. And as a result of his confidence in Riley Leonard, liking the Notre Dame money line minus 102 at FanDuel Sportsbook as well. That is all that we have here for today. These games are going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to dig into them both tomorrow and on Wednesday. We're going to be back with you once again Thursday. We're going to break down NFL Week 18. Megan Payton will join me. That'll be up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, but also on the YouTube page live 4 p.m. Eastern as Megan breaks down her best bets for this week. Subscribe to the YouTube page, leave us a thumbs up, and as always, make sure you turn on notifications to get notified as we go live Thursday 4 p.m. and then Friday at 10, and then for player props and noon for DFS as well. Austin, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy the college football. Enjoy your New Year's. Happy New Year's to you once again. We'll talk to you once again soon.
You bet. Happy, safe New Year to you too, Jim.
All right, you can find Austin on Blue Sky and X at Swaim3. I am on both Blue Sky and X at JimSannes as well. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a happy and safe New Year's. We'll talk to you once again after the break to get you set for NFL Week 18. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.